name is Tyler Duchinski. I've been volunteering here at the fort for around, I think, 12 years. And my primary focus is the militia. As far as actual training goes, the militia would have drilled semi-regularly, but definitely not to the point where they would have been anything close to a professional army. It's important to keep in mind that everyone in the militia not only was a part of the militia in keeping Fort Ross safe, but they also had other jobs throughout the day that they had to tend to. Just being part of the militia itself wasn't enough to warrant a position here at Fort Ross, just because the militia itself wasn't in constant need. Here at Fort Ross, the militia was never used for really any attacks, for any acts of aggression. It was mainly meant as a peacekeeping force and to keep the colony safe. Because something that you'll find is quite common with Fort Ross is that being on the edge of the Russian Empire, a lot of the materials, a lot of the manufactured goods came from a huge plethora of places. So you could be dealing with English goods, American goods, some Spanish goods, a lot of Asian goods. And that completely goes for the militia here. They were outfitted with English brown vest muskets, they were outfitted with French Charlevilles, really a mismatch of everything. So the militia at Fort Ross would have been equipped with a derivative of this, which is a musket. It's a smooth bore firearm that operates from a flintlock. Now the muskets at Fort Ross would have been either British or French, and they would have been really old models that you could have bought for very cheap. The best of the best was certainly not being sent here to the fringes of the Russian Empire. But with that being said, the example I have for you today, it's a bit short. The actual musket would have probably come up to about here, and I'm about 6'1", so they are pretty big and pretty heavy. Part of the reasoning for that was not only that a longer barrel would make the smooth barrel more accurate, but it would also allow the musket to be turned into a makeshift spear with the addition of a bayonet, which would be put on the muzzle. So with the founding of Fort Ross, a major goal for the Russians was to establish a good relationship not only with the Spanish to the south, but also with the neighboring Native American tribes. And part of that was actually selecting the right location for this colony, which would become Fort Ross. So from 1808 to 1811, the Russians sent out expeditions all up along the western coast of what's now the United States of America, trying to find the optimal location for growing grain, as well as for peaceful neighbors that would be able to assist them with their efforts. So now we're inside the Blockhouse, what was a staple of frontier defense for much of the 19th century. A blockhouse is essentially just a wooden tower that has multiple windows and firing points from which a defender can actually fire down upon. So to that end, we have multiple cannons in this blockhouse. And the one right here to my right is actually a replica of something called a carronade. A carronade is a Scottish weapon that was a bit shorter, a bit stubbier than a normal cannon. And carronades like this were actually confirmed to have been at the fort during the Russians' time here. And just as would have been back then, there's also various other cannons that are various make and model. This one here is actually a replica of a Russian gun that was found in Sitka, Alaska. So this is something that you would have seen not only a few instances of in Fort Ross, but also much farther north with the Russian colonies in Alaska. So right here, we have an example of what's a reproduction of an English Howitzer. And one of their actually bigger duties, since it was a little slow here, was saluting passing ships. So as trade ships would come into port, whether they be American, Mexican, or Spanish earlier, really any nation, Fort Ross would signal by firing cannon, just to signal the ships, and the ships would fire back. So the Russians actually fired these cannons so much for recreation, just for fun to see them go off, rather than for actual defense, that official reports from the Russian-American company actually request the militia here to cut back on the amount that they were using them, just to go to show a bit of what these cannons were actually used for.